This is... No, they can't. Oh,
Yeah,
now
they
you can
can
hear
now,
me. I
yeah.
can hear myself now as well. Anyway, as you can see, and thanks for coming along this afternoon. It's 2 o'clock already. We are talking about the insights from the Inspiring Science Fund. So I'm Sarah, I'm from Wellcome Trust. We were the co-funders along with UKRI of the Inspiring Science Fund, which was a £30 million scheme for the redevelopment and kind of updating of some science centres around the country. I worked on the scheme for Wellcome, took it over as it had already been awarded, and managed it with my partner in crime, Mike Sana, who many of you have already met, and used to force me to take selfies with him wherever we went. So I'm going to show you some of these as well as we go along. So we went, everywhere we went, it seemed to be in the middle of winter. So this is pre the days of Explore, Techniquest in Glendower. That one is Eureka, indeed. Oh, there's a screen here. So. That one is Catalyst up in Widnes. And finally, I believe we're at Leicester Space Centre there, National Space Centre in Leicester there as well. But he used to force me to do these. So as he is no longer working for Wellcome and is available for rent for a large fee, I thought I'd embarrass him. Sadly, he's not here to see it. But so we're going to talk today. I'm just giving you a quick insight to the science centres, and then I'm going to hand over to my glamorous colleagues here to tell you about it. So, as I said, the Inspiring Science Fund scheme funded 12 centres around the UK when we started. We were supporting science centres specifically as a subsector of the cultural sector. And the work we're going further with through ISF and is being done through UKRI and through other funders is bringing together that science centre sector and the rest of the cultural sector, as well as involving education and research to show the enormous value of learning from and collaborating with each other to create cultural and educational experiences. So we had the 12 centres around the UK here. As you can see, there were a huge number more funded, not as major grants in the ISF scheme, but through the ISF supplementary projects, 2 of which were run by ASDC on our behalf, Project Inspire and the Emerging Leaders programme. And we're coming up to another collaboration with the Museums Association, ASDC and the Liminal Space on the Bold Futures grants, and another grant that kind of came along at the same sort of time and will be going further forward is the Missions and Mindsets grants with UKRI. So you're going to hear about those another time in the conference. The 3 people here who are going to talk to you in a moment, I pressed the button. Sorry, they're not the 3 people here. The 3 objectives for the projects that we had through Inspiring Science were major innovative capital developments, organisational change, and working and in broadening audiences and communities and inclusivity for those science centres. So the 3 insights I was going to here to give you a quick introduction to from the Inspiring Science Fund overall evaluation that we did through Wellcome, and as well as what fed into that through all the evaluations from the projects that we worked with. And the 3 recommendations that have come out of those reports. And I know a lot of people have given their interest to find out more about this. And you're more than welcome to talk to me throughout the conference or message me afterwards. And we will hopefully be able to share these full reports after the conference as well. But the 3 major recommendations. So the first one up there is a word that we kind of invented through ISF, which was menitors. And I'm sure they wouldn't mind me sharing this with you, but the menitors were originally, through Wellcome's grant funding schemes, cost monitors. And coming into this project, I realised that this wasn't really what we needed on the ISF programmes, was auditors, but what was really needed were critical friends, mentors, people who could add skills and experience into these programmes for our benefit and those of the grantees developing the project, give an objective viewpoint, and really be that bridge between the funder and the project management teams, so that there wasn't a kind of them and us to fill in those gaps and to just kind of make that link in between how things were developing and what funders really needed to know. I've come from a science centre background myself and working in the cultural sector, so to be on this side of the funding for a change was, well, nice from that perspective, but also understanding that there are huge amounts of problems and queries and things that you just can't ask your funders directly, so having that person in the middle. And we had seven mentors across the 12 grantees. We applied one mentor to each centre, trying to match their skills or their expertise to what was particularly perhaps needed or been requested as some extra support for each centre. I just thought to embarrass 3 of them by putting their pictures up here. So this was Louise, Claire and Steve, each who worked on 2 of the centres. Sorry, not all of them. Claire worked with Dundee, Steve worked with Glendower and with Eureka, and Louise worked with W5 and Catalyst. So 3 of them got up there. And so I think you can find these people in a lot of the networks around the sector. And I just think having that kind of additional skill set, additional viewpoint was something that was hugely, hugely valuable, particularly to Wellcome in giving insights and giving opportunities for support that we wouldn't otherwise have been able to offer. But also has been, most of them I think have been kept on in different capacities or continuing some of their works by the different centres they've worked with. And having that freelance, more senior bit of experience was just really worth their weight in gold. The second recommendation I put together is the really exciting topic of reporting strategies and evaluation. Now, it seems really obvious, and I have to say it seemed really obvious to me when I took on this kind of work with Wellcome that there should just be something simple to do. Like, how is this not just already laid out for us? But actually, just creating a kind of common reporting strategy for all of the centres that we're working with and putting in that what we actually wanted to know from them, making that as simple as possible, making it regular as seemed appropriate, and trying to not make that a really onerous task for either the people doing the reporting or us looking at the reports afterwards as well. And I think just discussing that, if you have a grant, if you have a project like this, whether it's an executive or a funder or a programme strategy team, just create the thing that works for you and then apply that. It sounds really reductive to say it in that way, but I think that was something that seemed quite a new thing, certainly to Wellcome, and to making it fit for purpose. The second bit of that being evaluation. So we didn't get it right ourselves first time for Wellcome. So having that plan for what you can do and what you want to do and what you want to know about your project, having it done by an external company, some people, some experts in doing evaluation, you get an objective viewpoint, you get some really good feedback through that. Doing it yourself doesn't tend to work very well. Planning and arranging that alongside the main plans of your scheme and your programme. Setting a really comprehensive invitation to tender. Ask people what they think you can do or what they think they can do for you. And just kind of sharing your evaluation afterwards as well, if you can do that. Plan on how you're going to apply the learnings from it, don't just put it in a folder. Again, all these things seem really sensible and common sense and straightforward, but we're all guilty sometimes of not doing that the right way, and certainly this being a vehicle for this being ASDC conference, being an excellent vehicle for sharing those kind of things. Do share, even if you haven't come to a talk or had that experience, do share with each other, do talk to each other. And you know what, my biggest key thing for evaluation is the stuff that went wrong, far more useful to know about than all the stuff you did well. So always be honest in it and do that. And my final recommendation from the reports through Inspiring Science Fund is this exciting picture here. Ask your funders to fund a Changing Places toilet for you. Inclusivity is the massive focus, and it really should be the focus of a lot of our work moving forward, particularly when you're doing any form of capital development. Mike and I particularly noted the difference we heard from all of the projects about how their visitors responded when they said, we now have a Changing Places toilet in our venue. Funders don't seem to be thinking this is an exciting thing to do. For us, it just became really apparent that it seems to be like a really difficult thing for people to find funding for. But actually, it's quite a cheap project in the bigger scheme of things. It's really easy to argue for. There's no argument against it. So if you have an opportunity and you haven't already got something like this in your venue, do it. Ask your funders to say, we really want to put this in. It's a small change. It is literally a small room that somebody can drop in a ready formatted design space for you. It doesn't take a huge amount of inspirational artistic design to go into it, but it makes an enormous difference, and we were just really glad that we could support that for the venues that made that happen. So coming on to my final slide, mine are not anywhere near as good as the ones you're going to get, so please bear with my awful PowerPoint skills and enjoy those coming after me. Without further ado, introduce you to my three colleagues here who will talk to you about their Inspiring Science Fund projects and what they've learned through those. We've got Kostas from Aberdeen Science Centre, Victoria from W5 in Belfast, and Paul from the National Space Centre in Leicester. And please give them a round of applause and we'll move on.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. It's lovely to see you here. I am Kostas, and I'm here to talk about our experience of the Inspiring Science Funds, kind of like the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I don't know how well you know Aberdeen Science Centre. We were the first ones to open our doors in Scotland, and this was the building that we were very happy to receive. And now that you see our Victorian building, you spot our first challenge in having to refurbish it. So the building itself has a very long history. It started as the first public baths, then it became a tram shed, then a warehouse, then it fell into disrepair, and then the council kindly provided it to us as a science space. One of the main problems that we had was that being a grade B listed building, it's not very easy to change a lot. So when you have a fund that allows you to do a complete overhaul of your space, it took a lot of sleepless nights, especially when the engineers and the architects were saying, oh, we need to take a core sample of this. And suddenly it was like, but apart from the fact that our roof was not attached to any of the walls, I have to say our building, our building really helped us shine through. Now, the area that you're seeing here, it was pretty much our whole exhibition space. So it was a really modest space, and we needed to be quite smart in how we were utilizing it in order to bring it into kind of like the modern era. So being successful at bidding for an Inspiring Science Fund, we went from this to this. So fully high-tech, over 60 exhibits that are completely hands-on, latest technology, latest trends in science and technology. But this was the point where we've realized that going through such a massive change, we had to carry our team with us. Change can be very stressful, and over the process, the tail end of the process pretty much caught us as the first lockdown was happening. And that was where our team really started struggling. So we had to sit back and think, hey, how are we getting everyone involved? So the best thing that we could do was actually get them involved in the actual conversation, let them know what changes are happening, why they're happening, and ask for their opinions. Another thing, going from a really old, kind of like dated place into a fully kind of like high-tech thing was what we were experts at. Having been the first ones to open in Scotland, we were really taking pride that we've got a huge history of science communication and stuff like that. But the point of the refurbishment made us understand that long gone were the days where we would ask children to gather around an exhibit, point at it, and smile. We had to completely overhaul our pedagogies as well. So we had to go into the completely hands-on, the co-development aspect of things and using questions and research to base kind of like our engagements. In terms of this, ASTC programs like Science Capital in Practice and Explore Your Universe really showed us the way on how to get communities and our audiences all together kind of like involved in the process. But also it helped us understand that we as science communicators, we did not have to be the fountains of all knowledge. This understanding kind of like removed a huge weight off our shoulders, and we've moved from, hello, I'm Kostas, guess what's in my head? I know everything about this exhibit, to what do you think this is? What do you think is going to happen? What do you think is going to happen if we do something differently? Again, going into kind of like our old pedagogy into the new one, that was something that not everyone took on their stride immediately. So one of the things that we found extremely powerful and helpful in this respect was using reflective practice. This is half of the front page of our reflective diaries. Every single member of our team is issued with one. The other half is pretty much the Science Capital in Practice discussion points. So it's almost like a little competition of what do we know about our practice, what can we improve, and how we're going to go about and do it. Now, between the reflective diaries and the programs like Science Capital in Practice, Explore Your Universe, and so on and so forth, the conversation within our team then became a lot more inclusive of everyone, and it almost gave us a common goal to focus on and to kind of take change into our stride. So we were very happy to see the changes taking part, and this slide shows kind of like the difference that the Inspiring Science Fund has done on our outreach. So this is our outreach over the last year. So that was pretty much the end of the second lockdown and kind of like things slowly opening up. I have to mention that before receiving the Inspiring Science Fund, we had no engagement in the Highlands and Islands. So all that was because of that. And as the Science Centre in Scotland, we are very happy to receive kind of like a community subsidy from the Scottish Government, which comes with a KPI, which is 1,100 people for us. That KPI has been met within 4 or 5 months in the last 2 years. And last year alone, we've engaged with over 3,248 people. So, and this was largely the change of our approach to science communication, getting our communities and our audiences involved, but also being immediately responsive to their interests, aims, and ambitions for the future. In a similar way, we were involved in developing a CPD course for community learning and development practitioners. Our aim was to engage with over 90 people in Scotland. Because of COVID, we went digital, and as of yesterday, we've engaged with over 1,750 people. And Scotland is not even our main audience anymore. So this change in pedagogy allowed our team to become kind of like global. And at this point, I would like to thank you so much. I believe there's going to be some space for questions, and I would like to pass the torch over to Victoria. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kostas.
Hi, everyone. Everything Kostas just said. Okay, I'm done. No. It's really wonderful to be here today. I feel like a little bit of an imposter because when we started our Inspiring Science project, I actually wasn't at W5 at the time. It's something I've seen develop and been part of the sort of tail end of it. So forgive me for, you know, maybe having a few more notes than the other presenters here today. For those of you who maybe don't know, W5 is located in Belfast, and we're actually in a quite similar setting to Glasgow Science Centre. I love coming here and seeing a lot of the similarities we have. And we opened our doors in 2001. And since then, we really hadn't undertaken any kind of major capital investment. But over the past 5 years, we've really been reimagining our building, looking at how we approach our methodology and our evaluation systems, and really looking at what's that organisational change we need to move our science centre into the future. And we want to do all that while doing it sustainably. So this work was supported by a £3 million award from Inspiring Science and an additional £2 million investment from the Odyssey Trust, which is our parent company, and a grant from Tourism Northern Ireland. So I've outlined the main aims of the project there, but what I wanted to say about that was it all stemmed from our overarching vision of wanting to make a real difference in our community. And I know that's something, you know, everyone who's involved in the science centre sector wants to do. And we really wanted to attract those people who are unconvinced and disinterested in science and find new ways to really fire their imagination and get them engaged in STEM through a range of compelling, interactive and fun experiences. So we did this through a 4-phase approach, but the real key thing about this for us was, in order to understand our visitor better and to create that better experience, we realised it was all about engaging in the community, going into the communities, figuring out what those groups were that we needed to meet with, and having conversations, inviting people into the centre that maybe would have faced barriers to coming to us before, and finding really good ways not just to have them come to us, but ways we could go to them to get their input. So to ensure that the Inspiring Science investment in W5 met the project requirements and objectives, we had a really robust monitoring and evaluation framework. And that was developed by our project team and also external consultants. So as Sarah said, it's really important, you know, to have that sort of critical friend element and someone who knows how to do these things really well. So we invited 2 separate groups of evaluators in to look at what we were going to do in this project. And that was also done in parallel with the evaluation work commissioned by the Wellcome Trust through the Graphic Science. So overall, this aimed to identify our KPIs and measure progress against targets. And extensive engagement was conducted to extend our reach, co-design, co-development, and evaluate the new programs and approaches we were hoping to take through Inspiring Science. So we engaged with a number of different people, and one of the key, you can see in the first picture there, that's all of our staff. So we had an open evening one night where we invited them all in for pizza and some drinks, and to really talk about what we were hoping to do and get their feedback, because no one knows our visitors better than our staff. And W5 is a unique science centre in that we are part of a complex. So we also have an arena and an ice hockey team that form part of our parent company. So we even engage staff from across those areas to come in and tell us about what we were doing, what they saw, because a lot of them are parents and have brought their children to the centre before, or were previous teachers and things like that. So they were a really key audience for us, and we learned some amazing things from them. We also engaged schools, teachers and youth groups, special education needs, families, schools and groups. And in a community-focused way, we really chose to reach out to those from social disadvantaged backgrounds and rural inclusion, which is a big issue for us in the education system in Northern Ireland. And again, obviously, families and the general public were part of that. But we also reached out to economic and strategic stakeholders, which is how we ended up getting an additional fund from Tourism Northern Ireland. So making sure all of those people that sit within our estate know what we're doing, what we're trying to achieve, and that hopefully we can work together to extend our reach for both sides of the organisation. And a key part of this that we decided to take forward was we created a new W5 Stakeholders Forum, which was our co-design and co-reference group. And they have become a consistent part of what we're doing moving forward. And that is sort of made up of leaders from the community, leaders from business and industry, teachers, etc. So it's a core group of people who feed back constantly to us about what we're doing. So we were really enjoying moving forward with Inspiring Science, and I bet you can't guess what I'm going to say next. So obviously at the outset of our project, there was no mention on any risk register of a global pandemic. And the impact of COVID on the project was, to say the least, significant. It led to many delays. We had to actually close our building in March 2020, and we were not able to reopen until October 21. So the original plan was to open with our brand new facility in June 2020. So you can imagine the extent of being closed for that long had on what we were trying to do. So basically many of our engagement activities were also put on hold as a result of that. But it did have some benefits, which I'm going to come into in a minute. So what went well in this project? So we are absolutely thrilled with how the venue looks and feels now, all of the exhibits and feedback from people who've come into the space since we relaunched has been overwhelmingly positive. The delivery of community work and outward activity. So the insight and advice of our community groups has been vital, and we've decided that's a key part of how we're going to take forward bigger projects in the future. What we've done has actually enabled us to create a more robust financial model for how we go forward, and it's going to allow us to create improvements again in the future. And the other sort of key one I want to highlight in this slide, and it's something Kostas talked about too, is this blended learning idea, which was a result of COVID-19. It really changed our society and how our young people have been interacting with each other and the world. So our learning and engagement team developed new programs to help young people stay engaged with STEM. And this has been matched with a blended approach with online and in-person CPD courses for teachers. And we're pre-recording a lot of our sessions so we can send those out to schools afterwards. And it's also part of how we're going to do everything moving forward, both to mitigate risk and also because we're seeing increased engagement and participation in what we're doing as a result of that. So what we learned, or maybe what we might do differently, I think Sarah talked about this too, is the initial contractual elements took a lot longer than we anticipated originally, from the tender process to engaging. So we would certainly allow a lot more time for that in future. There's never enough time. And although the loss of key staff was actually on our risk register, we did lose some very key staff, we could have managed that a little bit better and planned for that a bit better. The governance structure, particularly the involvement of the co-design, co-reference group, provided a critical friend. So it's something like I said, we'd like to take that forward in the future. The other things I'd just like to highlight here are that we actually, on top of Inspiring Science and that partnership I mentioned with Tourism Northern Ireland, we actually got invited to include some additional features into the project, which extended the timeline, which is not something we foresaw, but it's obviously something we're very happy that has happened. So we were really planning, like I said, to open in June 2020, but as a result of COVID-19 delays, our exhibit company is based in Sheffield, and trying to get them to come over and finish the work we were doing, obviously that pushed things out and we weren't able to open until 2021. So that's really meant that our evaluation period has been extended. We were really hoping to wrap things up before now, but this is really just the beginning of the next phase for us. We're still building on that data from the impact we've been having with our new facility, and we're looking forward to resuming full normal operations going forward. And I just wanted to give you, the result is a totally reimagined W5, and here's a quick look at what that looks like. you very much. You're all very welcome. I hope you'll take the chance to come and visit us in Belfast soon. Please drop me a note if you would like to do that. Thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to Paul now.
Hello. I don't have quite the same soundtrack or bass line, but I'll try and get you excited about our project. So our Inspiring Science project was called Extended Reality for New Audiences. And so our aims were to create a brand new XR. When we talk about XR, we mean virtual reality and augmented reality. So to start a new community engagement program, something that Space Centre did not have before, to create a new immersive space mission exhibition on site at the Space Centre, and also to build a new teaching space and testing space and launch a level 3 qualification. So we managed to kind of construct a really nicely kind of virtuous circle of all these different activities that kind of fed into one another and cross-pollinated. So this was kind of our big grand vision. I think we've all talked about the pandemic and things, but yeah, everything was going pretty well. We had a little bit of slippage through the first phase of the construction project. And the final piece for us to do was our exhibition, which was probably the most complex part. But basically, yeah, the pandemic happened. I think as well, the Brexit situation, supply chain disruption of both labour and materials, the silicon shortage, we had a lot of kind of complex AV and IT in there, so that played havoc with getting hold of things. And then trying to launch a brand new qualification with all the secondary schools closed was a bit tricky, trying to get kind of awareness of what we were trying to do. So yeah, it was a bit of a nightmare. But we got there. We kind of, I mean, this has been part of my life for I think about 5 years. And to be able to say like we've almost done is a little bit crazy, but we are kind of practically finished now. So our reality lab is no longer kind of an artist's impression. Just 2 weeks ago, we had our first cohort of students. So we've launched the BTEC Level 3 qualification, co-delivered with Leicester College and our own in-house lecturer on site doing immersive design and development. So that's really exciting to see where that goes and how that can feed into our other programs. We have a community engagement team now, which I think is one of the biggest achievements of the project. That is now embedded and a core part of our discovery team and part of our kind of Pathways program. And they've done some amazing work with community groups that are very high on the multiple indices of deprivation. So very proud of the work that those guys have done. And we finally finished our new amazing immersive space mission experience called TetraStar Spaceport. So everything went great. So I wanted to kind of just go over a few lessons learned. As Sarah said, it's good to reflect on these things and think about next time. One of the key things for us was communication. So through the pandemic, I think this is obviously always a critical part of any project when you have many external and internal stakeholders. But I think we kind of missed, there was a bit of a disparity that was exacerbated by the pandemic where those, working through lockdown, trying to build an exhibition with all of the crazy challenges of doing that, we were kind of working in the zone, trying to achieve the best that we could given the situation. But then reporting to kind of internal structures, to boards and things like that, where maybe they're not quite going through the same stresses and pressures. I think there was expectations of kind of legacy milestones still being relevant and not quite communicating the reality of where we were. So I think that was a lesson learned. In normal times, it's key, but I think when things go bad, having those lines of communication really clear and transparent is absolutely critical. Co-creation was a big part of our project, but it is hard to do, I think, in a meaningful way. When you're doing a complex exhibition project, there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of variables, a lot of constraints to consider. And I think where the co-creation team form and kind of funnel into that is really critical to think about from how you design your co-creation kind of strategy. So I think fortunately, just before the pandemic, we did do a 6-week program with a group of young people and families, which was really valuable. But I think there is always the danger of it either being completely co-creation led and maybe not quite achieving your own objectives, or it becoming a bit tokenistic and just kind of a bit of a cherry on top as opposed to core of it. So there's definitely more we want to do in the future with our developments to refine that, but it's difficult to do it in a meaningful way. Prototyping was absolutely critical for us. So we used kind of VR, and the kind of XR was a running thread, not just in kind of delivery, but also in how we created the content as well. So we were able to prototype this quite complex story-driven AV theming exhibition, and actually put people through it, get all of our internal stakeholders to be able to review it and test things before we, touched a finger in terms of kind of creating anything, before we laid a brick. So that was great to be able to de-risk expensive decisions, and it allowed us to kind of iterate and test. So that was a key thing. And I think kind of that was at the start of the process, but do not underestimate user testing, especially when you have complex hands-on interactives and a collaborative mission-style environment. So we finished the build of the project, but that was just the beginning. Kind of, we spent a lot of time refining that process. When you're working with whole school groups, to be able to, which is kind of part of one of the key deliverables, just the logistics of getting school groups in, doing testing, and all that kind of readiness. That was a real challenge, but absolutely essential to ensure realising the full potential of the project. I think this notion of picking your battles. We were ambitious with our project. There was complexity, and I think it's knowing, when to drop things. And so originally we were going to do 3 scenarios with our simulated space mission. We ended up deciding that would have watered down the experiences, so we just focused on 1 mission and doing that really well. So deviating from the original plan, but being confident in doing that. And to be able to do that, it's really important to set your objectives up front. So when there is pressure in a project, you're able to move towards and make those right choices without having to, overly question what you're doing. So I think, pick those battles wisely. And with our community engagement program, I think the right people make all the difference. We were incredibly fortunate to have an amazing community liaison officer, CJ. He was just an absolute breath of fresh air to our organisation, coming from a totally different approach to the people that we normally employed and worked with. And I think you just got to put that trust in their expertise. Don't think that you know best. Allow them time. Be incredibly humble with these new audiences. It's all about conversations. It's about human relationships, and I think these relationships then lead to partnerships, and the partnerships breed trust, which is absolutely essential to become embedded within those community groups where these barriers exist. Evaluations are kind of been mentioned, but we had an in-kind contribution as our evaluation partner, and for various reasons, that kind of fell by the wayside. But I think it's a critical part, not just at the end of the project, but throughout the project. So yeah, if you want it to be good and useful, you've got to fund it, and you've kind of got to commit to that process and factor that into your project program. And know your funder. With these kind of big projects, there's normally multiple funders with different expectations. We failed on the phase 1 of the ISOF bids because we pitched what we needed and not what the funders wanted. And so that was a humbling experience. And then for the phase 2, we looked at it in a fresh way and made sure that we were presenting something that was aligned. We were both aligned with the ambition of the project. We weren't trying to shoehorn something into somebody's funding scheme, because even if you do get it over the line, there's going to be issues down the line as you try to bring that to fruition. So make sure that you are, aiming for the same goals. And if it's not a good fit, just move on to the next funder. You know, these things take a lot of investment, a lot of time. You know, try and make those decisions early on if this is the right project fund for you. And I think this, you know, there's a spectrum of involvement of oversight and reporting. So I'd say welcome. We're on the high side, not in a bad way, but I'd say, you know, they're quite heavily involved in that oversight. And that's fine as long as you know what you're getting into going into a project. Other funders can be very hands-off, and that's great. Some can change their mind halfway through and kind of reset the goalposts, which is not ideal, but it happens. So I think, you know, speaking to other people who have worked with funders on large projects before, try and get a feel for what the expectations are going to be, so that you can build that into your program. Because, you know, anything's possible, but it's best to know up front so you can make sure that that is part of your approach. And then finally, from an organisational change perspective, it takes time. We're an organisation of 130 or so people. Taking everyone with you is hard. We did develop a new ethos and values kind of strategy over the course of our ISF project, but the challenge now is living and breathing that. You have to allow time, but at the same time, you need to demonstrate kind of things on a regular basis, that things are actually happening, that there are tangible changes occurring. Other people, you know, they lose interest and they don't, you know, think it was a waste of time doing that storytelling workshop or whatever it was. There's got to be a tangibility to it as you progress on this, you know, quite significant journey as an organisation. And I think our audiences and our employees are more value-driven than ever before, and so it's absolutely essential that you know your audience and you let them know you, and that's kind of, you know, where we are and important to be like really aware of. So that's the National Space Centre project. Thank you.
So we have just gone past, in fact, 2:50. But if anybody has got some questions, I think we can probably squeeze a few in. That's general no over there. I think there's one. There's a couple over here. Have we got a roving mic, or do you just want to shout? Lady at the top there.
I was interested in, you were all kind of commenting on that idea of co-development with your audiences and how you're hoping it's going to be more than tokenistic. And I was wondering whether you'd like to share ways that you try to bring that about, or what you would do in the future.
So about co-development, you all hear?
Yeah.
I guess there's a fear from people who have been in this business for a long time to allow voices in, and so I think it's just trying to make people comfortable that it's an opportunity to enrich and make yourself relevant and just hear new perspectives. So I think that there's that internal barrier, and I think once you overcome that, great things can kind of happen. But there's definitely resistance from people who have been doing this kind of thing to embrace it. But at the same time, I wouldn't say go all in and give the kids a bunch of crayons and expect them to come up with something amazing, because that is definitely not the right way to go either. So there's a line down the middle of, you know, being informed by those processes and creating a construct that will lead to the kind of outcomes that you want, without just expecting miracles from, you know, this family or these young people. It's like you've got to be realistic and use your expertise to guide that process in the right direction.
Yeah, and I would just say on top of that, if you are going to ask people for their input, it is important you communicate back to them what you are going to do with that. So whether it's, that was a really great idea, but it's just not part of what we're able to do at this time, or whether it's, that was such a good idea and here's how we're going to use it. The communication piece of that is critical if you want to continue to do that co-development work.
Absolutely, and I think from our point of view, kind of like co-development is a continuous journey. So it's never kind of like a fixed thing, and we keep learning. So one of the things that we've learned from our communities is, after so many engagements, they just go back into relying to whatever you have to offer. In those cases, it might be worth just going there without any science, do whatever they do and then take the science out of their interests rather than imposing our kind of like interests and knowledge on them. But again, it's a journey that it will never end, I don't think.
Thanks. That's yeah, really comprehensive. And I was going to say pretty much the same sort of thing in terms of co-creation is one aspect, but then co-evaluation of that is you know just as important at the end. And as Victoria said, kind of communicating what you're going to do with people's input and managing their expectations, that they're not just going to find a new science centre with their exact thing that they thought up in it, is really, really good. Is there any more questions? Over here? Sorry, we're making whoever's running around with the microphone do a lot of work.
I can shout, that's easier.
You can shout, oh, hello, Simon.
As a recipient of an Inspiring Science grant, I mean, I share your pain and your joy in equal measure, so a lot of it resonated with me. But my question's for Sarah. You know, over the years, it's been really, really difficult for science centres to secure appreciable amounts of funding. And, you know, the Wellcome Trust has been a massive, massive supporter of science centres. And I know my own has received a lot of money over the years. And I'd always found the Wellcome Trust to be a very pragmatic funder and a very understanding funder when things went wrong. Now, the Wellcome Trust has of late changed its strategic focus and its objectives. The world is changing all the time, though, and objectives change all the time. Is there any hope for science centres and the Wellcome Trust moving forward?
I knew somebody was going to ask me that question. I would like to say I think there is hope, for sure, with Wellcome. Obviously, what Wellcome's change in direction and strategy, it's not change in direction as such, but the new strategic focus on particular areas of health research has meant that we've pulled back very much from the cultural sector. But what we've been doing, and certainly the work that I and the new team I work in are doing, is helping to share what we've learned from the previous culture and society programmes and schemes that have been run. And that is all feeding back into what Wellcome does for the future. I would say keep your eyes on particular aspects of those health challenges that Wellcome's funding, because science and science engagement is still science, and if it fits into some of the schemes that will be announced over the coming year in those, certainly look towards that, but also look towards what you've learned from working with Wellcome, and I say that with absolutely my tongue in my cheek. I've certainly learned a lot of working for Wellcome as to how you can apply that to other funders, just to use the incredible achievements, and I promised myself I wouldn't mention the C word, COVID, in this presentation, but if people can do this in the pandemic, you can certainly do it other times. And so, you know, blow your own trumpets, shout about what you've done, shout about what you've achieved. Wellcome has certainly linked into other funders, people like UKRI, of course, we've worked very closely with on this, but also that's linked into a lot of the other research funders, public engagement funders that wouldn't necessarily have known about science centres in the past. So never say never is what I can come out with from that. But at the moment, I have no other clue about what Wellcome's plans are, other than they are undoubtedly going to change in the future. We will have a new CEO for Wellcome towards the end of next year. They will have a different direction to focus on, I'm sure. So never say never, but for now it's a no from Wellcome, but that doesn't mean to say we're not certainly going to support you if you want to approach different people. I know Simon had a question as well here. I just wanted to go to the next one. Or feel free to shout.
Simon.
I thought you pointed at me before, sorry. It's just that actually, Victoria, you mentioned about negotiation before. You said about changing plans. During negotiations on contracts always take longer than you think. How easy was it, Paul, to change the plan when you were in the project? Did you find it an easy process with funders, or was it a difficult process to get through?
I think we didn't make any material changes. It was more within the scope of the primary objectives. So for us, it wasn't too much of a challenge to kind of deviate, because I guess it's how explicit you are up front. So it's finding the right amount of detail, but not crystallizing it that much that you don't have scope to discover what is actually the right solution along the way. There's an expectation to kind of have this final thing, and it's like, well, that's why I'm asking for this money, because I need to go on this journey with you know, assemble a team of experts to be able to deliver this. So I think it's finding that balance of like having a, you know, a solid definition of what you're trying to achieve, but not being that explicit that you tie yourself in knots when things inevitably don't quite work out how you thought. So I think in that respect, Wellcome were very supportive in allowing us to kind of find our path.
Have we got any more? I know we are very much over time. Yeah, we need to move on. But anyway, thank you very much for coming. I'm pretty sure these guys as well will agree. If you want to come and talk to us after the session, please do. But thank you very much, and give them a round of applause.
I was so stressed when they